This is Amy Moritz, and I am with the Shalom Band Institute. And we are a group of colleagues who find our work at the intersection of stories, systems, and spirit. And I am joined today with Annie Allen, who is going to share a story with us from her own life experience and work, and then help us further reflect on this interplay between stories, systems, and spirit. So welcome, Annie. Would you start us off with your story?
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. Between 1995 and the year 2000, I was the Executive Officer for Cultural Pluralism and Racial Equality at the University of Vermont. That's a really big title, Executive Officer for Cultural Pluralism and Racial Equality. I was, in essence, an associate provost. I worked in the provost office with the president and the senior administration. I worked with all the deans in all the colleges. I was an active member on the president's cabinet and was involved in nearly all of the policies, procedures of this major land-grant university. Every May that we had commencement, as every college and university around the country has commencement, and the university would produce a commencement booklet. And in that booklet, every single member of the institution basically was named somewhere. It would start with pages with every trustee, every officer, the president, the provost, the vice presidents, the associates, the deans, the associate deans, the department chairs, every faculty member, and then it would run into this list of 600 or more graduates who were graduating in that any given year. Well, commencement day came in the year 1997, and all of the officers, we dress up in our regalia and our commencement robes and gowns and robes and hoods and hats and staffs, and we process through this crowd of several hundred and onto the stage. And as we're sitting on the stage and the commencement address begins and the program begins, and I'm sitting there and I'm flipping through, I'll just use this, I'm flipping through the commencement book, and somehow I noticed my name wasn't in the book, anywhere in the book, between the other associate provosts or with the president's cabinet members or with any of the staff that served the trustees or my department or the Center for Cultural Pluralism or anywhere in this book was my name. And my spirit sunk, and I was incredibly hurt. And later that week, I went into the president's wing and tried to discover how could such an error occur. This is a official document of the university. Every name is spelled correctly. It passes through a dozen different sets of eyes before it's sent to print. And I couldn't imagine how such an error could occur. So as I'm in the president's office and I'm speaking to the secretaries and the clerks and the staff and the proofreaders and the editors and the printing pressmen and everyone, people are saying to me, "Oh, it must have been a terrible oversight. We're so sorry." And I kept pushing back and saying, "How can you make such an oversight? I'm the only person of color in this entire hierarchy of officers." And that's basically the end of the story. What I wanted to share about that story is it was a good example of institutional racism. There wasn't any one particular person who intentionally left my name out of the commencement book. There wasn't anybody who intentionally removed it, but there was an entire cadre of people who didn't notice the importance of my position. They didn't value all of the work that I had been doing there for several years. And it told me more about the institution and the way the institution had functioned for 200 years, where it was assumed that all of the officers and the faculty members would be white, and that this position of associate provost for equality and for diversity was something off to the side somewhere, something extra maybe that was added. And it had me for a long time doubt my work. It made me wonder, will we always live in a culture where people of color are either dismissed or ignored or discounted or underestimated? And it was something that I experienced a lot in many positions that I had, if I were the one and only.
Heard as you shared your story, and just kind of tying it with our theme, which was about a system, right? A system of institutional racism that you experienced in the late 90s in your job. One of the things that really stands out to me is when you said you were on the stage and looking, and your spirit just fell, your spirit dropped.
Yes.
And that sense of how those are connected and the spirit. Can you say more about that?
Right. When I interviewed for the position back in 1995, I encountered so many people who were eager and welcoming and who I felt connected to. I felt on an individual basis, I had wonderful colleagues who were engaging and who I engaged with and who I felt connected to. And on an individual basis, I could have lunch with anybody on campus and enjoy the experience and feel connected. And it was on the institutional level where there was this disconnect. So on the personal level, on the story level, I can share about positive experiences and positive connections on a spiritual level with individuals. Spiritually, there was a long history of white supremacy in Vermont. The very land that the university was built upon belonged to Abenaki Indians, and it was not given to the university by the Abenaki. It was acquired by the Ethan Allen family. And when I say acquired, it wasn't purchased from the Indians, it was taken away. So there's this long, history. And that's where I believe what Fred Smith talks about, the spirit and the institutions intertwining. There's this very long history of mistreatment of people of color. And then over time, our systems take on that white supremacy, the institutions take that on. And it doesn't necessarily, in my view, translate to the individual spirit or the individual soul, because as I said, I had very positive and connecting experiences with individuals.
It seems to me that that's the real challenge, though, right? So that I think some people, and I'll generalize as a white person, can dismiss institutional racism because of some of the healthy interpersonal relationships that they have with people of color. And it seems that that can be a part of the challenge, is to get individuals to realize the systems that we are all embedded in.
Absolutely. And we're all a part of that. We're all complicit. we all are part of the same system. We may view it differently from our own personal lens, from our own experiences with the system.
Yeah, thank you. The other thing that my mind went to as you were telling your story about how the land was originally required from the indigenous, the first peoples, that act of violence and aggression and oppression, the spirit that that act manifested is embedded in this institution as it carries on. And so one of the things I've noticed, and I'm curious to have you to reflect on this, is some of my colleagues in Canada and in Australia begin every meeting, every gathering with an acknowledgement that the land upon which they currently sit, stand, what have you, was first land that belonged to indigenous first peoples.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, it's something that we are not doing in the United States. And I just wonder what your thoughts are about that.
I've never heard of that practice, but it sounds to me to be a healing ritual. But you first have to admit that there's been a harm. And I'm not sure in the United States we are anywhere near that. Even admitting that there's been tremendous harm done. I remember being very active in the anti-apartheid movement in the 1980s, and I remember in the early 1990s, the the Truth and Reconciliation movement in South Africa. It started with truth. It
Yes.
started with truth telling, and then an admission of harm before there could be reconciliation. And I think in the United States, we wanted to jump from harm to reconciliation without reparation, without even admission of harm done. And people in Canada understand that by saying the land that we sit on belong to indigenous people. People in Australia possibly acknowledge that.
It's an acknowledgement.
And
Yeah.
it's part of then the story that is told. When we tell the American story, we talk about the push westward. We talk about these hardy, good-hearted farmers who went out in covered wagons. That's the story. That's the American story, and therefore, because of that interpretation, that story that we tell, we've left out the experiences of indigenous people, of people of slave descent.
Yeah, I don't know who it is that I quote this from, but it's a quote that you just brought back to mind, that the stories we tell matter and
Yes.
how we tell them
Yeah.
matter, which I think you've just made such a great point of that in your sharing today, that how we tell them and what we tell matters. So as you look forward, I'm thinking about how I've seen some of the younger people wanting to reclaim, tell our collective story, and thinking about the movements to take down the statues of the Confederate generals. I'm here in the southern United States, and so that's been a pretty big thing. But wonder what do you see going forward about this story, and where do you see hope?
I see hope in our collective of a group of people from diverse backgrounds that are willing to share stories of our American experience. I see hope in those young people that are willing and open to talking about a different America. And I think that in that storytelling, we will then live into those possibilities. We'll be able to live into the possibility of a multicultural America, an America that lives up to its founding documents. I do believe we can get there, and I think to a great degree we have been on that road, and will continue to be on that road.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Annie. Thanks for your time and for this great conversation. And I'll look forward to the one that we have next time. And hope everybody stays tuned to hear from other members of the Shalom Band Institute, and to stay tuned on the YouTube channel for Annie's next time to talk with us.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you, Amy. See you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.